I finally have something beautiful to show you, my love, and before you imagine that it is something you can hold in your hands, something wrapped in a box, or something that can be captured perfectly in a photograph, let me tell you that what I want to show you is much deeper than that. It is a feeling, a realization, a new way of seeing love, and perhaps even a glimpse of the future that becomes possible when two people stop running from their emotions and finally become honest about what lives inside their hearts. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life do not arrive with noise, they arrive quietly, almost invisibly, through a change in someone's behavior, through a softened heart. Through a conversation that finally happens after months of silence, or through the simple realization that despite everything that happened, love never completely disappeared. Maybe you have been waiting for a sign, wondering whether this connection still matters, wondering whether someone still thinks about you, or questioning whether the feelings you once shared were real. And perhaps today this message is reminding you that love cannot always be measured by immediate action. Human beings are complicated, emotions are complicated, and sometimes people need time to understand what their own heart is trying to tell them. There are moments when someone may care deeply but still be afraid. Moments when they may want closeness but fear vulnerability, and moments when they may miss you but struggle to admit it because admitting it would require them to face everything they have been avoiding. This is why emotional maturity is so important in love. Love is not simply about feeling something intensely, it is about understanding what that feeling means, taking responsibility for it, and learning how to express it in a healthy way. The beautiful thing I want to show you is the possibility of love that does not need manipulation, games, jealousy, or emotional confusion to feel powerful. It is the kind of love that brings peace rather than constant anxiety. It is the kind of connection where you do not have to constantly ask, "Do they care about me?" Because their consistency begins answering that question for you. It is the kind of love where two people can communicate their fears instead of using silence as punishment, where they can apologize without losing their pride, where they can disagree without trying to destroy each other emotionally, and where they understand that vulnerability is not weakness but one of the deepest forms of courage. Maybe you have experienced the opposite. Maybe you have known what it feels like to give your heart to someone and then wonder why their behavior changed. Maybe you have experienced waiting for a message, rereading old conversations, analyzing small details, and trying to understand whether someone's silence meant they had stopped caring. If you have, remember something important. Uncertainty can make the mind create stories that are not always true. Psychology teaches us that when information is incomplete, the human brain naturally tries to fill the gaps. That is why silence can sometimes feel louder than words. When you do not know what someone feels, your mind may begin creating explanations, and those explanations can become emotionally exhausting. You may start believing that you were not enough, that someone else was better, or that the relationship failed because there was something wrong with you. But another person's inability to communicate does not automatically define your worth. Someone's fear does not mean you were unlovable. Someone's confusion does not mean your love was meaningless. And someone's decision to walk away does not erase the beauty of what you gave. Love should never become a courtroom where you constantly put yourself on trial. You deserve to experience love without having to prove that you are worthy of receiving it. And perhaps the beautiful thing being revealed to you now is not simply another person's feelings, but your own emotional growth. Think about the person you were before you experienced disappointment. Think about how you used to understand love. Maybe you believed love meant always sacrificing yourself, always being available, always forgiving, always waiting, or always putting another person's needs above your own. But mature love teaches you something different. It teaches you that compassion does not require self-abandonment. Forgiveness does not require returning to the same unhealthy situation. Patience does not mean waiting forever without boundaries. And loving someone does not mean losing yourself to keep them. Real love allows two complete human beings to meet each other, not two broken people trying to use each other as medicine. There is a beautiful difference between needing someone and choosing someone. When you need someone to make you feel valuable, your relationship can become dependent on constant reassurance. But when you already know your value and still choose to love someone, the relationship becomes a partnership rather than an emotional survival strategy. This is where something beautiful begins to emerge. You stop asking, "How can I make this person stay?" and start asking, "Can we create something healthy together?" That shift changes everything. It changes the way you communicate, the way you handle conflict, the way you interpret silence, and even the way you experience closeness. Instead of chasing certainty, you begin creating trust. Instead of demanding constant proof, you begin observing consistency. Instead of trying to control another person's emotions, you become responsible for your own. And that is one of the most beautiful forms of emotional freedom. Perhaps the person you love is also going through a transformation you cannot see. Maybe they have been learning lessons about relationships, attachment, communication, and vulnerability. Maybe their past taught them to protect themselves, and now they are slowly realizing that protection can sometimes become a prison. Some people learn to hide their feelings because somewhere in their past they discovered that being emotionally open could lead to rejection. Others become distant because closeness once brought them pain. Some people become overly independent because depending on anyone feels dangerous. Others become anxious because abandonment has taught them to constantly seek reassurance. Understanding these patterns does not mean excusing unhealthy behavior, but it can help you understand why love sometimes becomes complicated. The goal is not to diagnose another person from a distance. The goal is to recognize that behind many emotional behaviors there is a human being trying to protect something vulnerable inside themselves. And when two people become emotionally aware enough to recognize this,